Libra, welcome to your November 2020 transits report. It's Rena here. So in November, every year, there's a focus on finances because the sun is in Scorpio, and Scorpio is a sign after you, which means that's in the second house, and that is the house of earned income. And so this may be an area that you're concentrating on. And let me see. So this was an area where Mercury went retrograde back in mid-October. I'm I'm pretending that it's in the past when actually, as I record this, it's actually in the future. And so for many of you, you might hear it before the actual date of October 13th. And so Mercury retrograding in the second house means that there can be some kind of money that, the check is in the mail and then it never shows up, or something to do with maybe even negotiation with your employer about salary, things like that. But it's also the house of self-esteem. So this is something that may be about self-worth issues. Do I ask enough for salary when I'm asked to present salary requests? If somebody's looking for a job, for instance, they may realize that they have to revise this, that they are selling themselves short, and other kinds of issues that relate to self-esteem that might not have specifically to do with money, but are just about yourself as a whole. Because Mercury, during this retrograde, goes back into Libra, and on the 3rd, Mercury turns direct at 25 degrees of Libra. So something gets resolved, and it's in that first house of the self. So you might say to yourself, and I'm using this example because I think this is fairly commonplace as a dilemma for Libra, something along the lines of, I want to learn how to become more assertive. I want to learn how to be very direct and be able to say no without feeling guilty and without being angry that somebody asks me that, so that I will have to say no to them. Because sometimes people, I've had this experience, they get angry because it bothers them that they have to say no. And it triggers that sense of guilt within themselves. And then they're angry that, and maybe they don't handle that very well. So being able to just say no and not feeling guilty and feeling like you're doing the right thing, even if you could do whatever it is that is being asked of you, you just might not feel like you want to, or you want to be alone, or you want that time for your own activities. So the other thing that is notable that is going on concurrently with that at the same time is that Mars is retrograding in Aries, which is your opposite house. Which is at your it's your house in the universal chart, but it's opposite you in this particular context. In your personal sense, your personal chart actually will vary from Libra Sun or Libra Rising person, one from the other because of, degree of Sun or Rising. So even that may not be entirely accurate. But looking at it from the general standpoint of it being in the 7th house, this is the house of relationships that you rule. And Mars is the god of war. So there may be some conflict in relationships. Now, please don't think that this is going to come out of the blue. I don't think that a lot of this, because Mars has been in this house for a while. And when Mars is direct, that's when you can really see the fireworks, if there are any. When Mars is retrograde, there's a frustration. There's a feeling of not being able to maybe deal with something head on because of maybe other matters that are occurring at the same time, because this is also the house of legal affairs. And so let's say that you were planning on getting a divorce, but perhaps because of the shutdown issues, all of that has been postponed. The courts have been closed, unless it's something very serious, and or maybe they're clogged up, and you've just been waiting to deal with this. And it's been frustrating because perhaps you have somebody else that you are interested in dating, that you are dating, that you're committed to, and you want to be able to pursue that wholeheartedly, and you still feel like you have unfinished business. Who knows? This might be related to a child, a shared something shared with that person. Who knows? But in any case, there might have been lull in the action, and in November, Mars does go direct, and it stations direct on the 13th of the month at 15 degrees of Aries. And one thing to note too is that this can simply be that you feel like you haven't been able to do things with your spouse lately for whatever reason, and that has been frustrating. And then you're able to get more active with him or her. So it doesn't have to be something bad with Mars. On the 10th, Mercury goes back into Scorpio, and so it's back in that second house. And then so you have the Sun and you have Mercury both in this money house. And that, is giving you a focus for financial matters. You might be speaking on them as well, communicating in a direct way about them. Maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding. If this was a salary negotiation, then there might have been some misunderstanding, but now you're back on track as far as that is concerned. On the 15th, there is a new moon in your second house at 23 degrees of Scorpio. So if there, is some kind of salary negotiation, perhaps you win that negotiation and you have a whole new chapter when it comes to your finances, and that could bode well for them. Speaking of which, on the 21st, Venus goes into this sector as well. And Venus rules the second house, so that is a double Venusian influence. And what that can do is enhance the possibility of money coming to you from your earning power specifically, but I would say that you just attract money magnet. Because I have personally experienced, for instance, with Jupiter in transiting that house, money that I did not earn coming to me during that time. So I don't, usually the 8th house is that sort of thing where it's coming to you from some other source. But I don't think it always works out that way. So I try to generalize things and use the second house as a catch-all money house. So however it comes to you. That's what they say in the law of attraction is like, it's none of my business how it comes to me, but I won't, I accept it. On that same date of the 21st, we have the Sun going into Sagittarius. Now, that is a friendly angle to you called a sextile, 60 degrees from you. And this is the third house of communication. So this puts the emphasis now from a practical area, the Earth house, to the mental house of the third house, the house that Gemini rules, and Sagittarius is there. And so, I mean, I said Sagittarius, but the sun is there. And this gives emphasis to matters related to teaching, to learning something, whether it's, taking a course, reading a book. But if it's taking a course, unlike the ninth house, the opposite house, which Sag rules, and has more of a connection to higher learning, so the academia, the college level learning. This is more of practical knowledge. So learning a new skill. This can also be the house of teaching, teaching lower grades, tutoring, public speaking, the media, even the internet, because that is a major form of communication these days. On the 28th, Neptune turns direct at 22 degrees of Pisces. So I believe Neptune went retrograde in June. Neptune is an outer planet, so we don't really put much emphasis on outer planets in terms of how they affect us personally in the signs that they're in specifically. That's more for mundane astrology or the predictions of the world. But I will say that when an outer planet transits a house in our chart, and of course, again, I just have to state that I would not know exactly if it's going to transit a particular house for you, because it's going to depend upon your degree of sun or rising. And if you're listening for your sun in Libra, you have a rising sign, that is determined by your time of birth. And that is what sets up the natal chart. And the natal chart is often preferred for predictive purposes because of it is the chart that is created from the time that you came onto the material plane. The solar chart can be helpful too when you look at trends in your life, but it's more of an aspirational thing. So I see it almost like more in a spiritual sense of the things that you want to become in this lifetime. But the natal chart to me is much more about people wondering, what's going to happen. It's more about the natal chart. So in your natal chart, again, depending on the individual, but for many of you, this will fall in Neptune turns direct at 22 degrees of Pisces. And this is going to fall in most Librans' 6th house of health, work, and your daily schedule. So I believe Neptune went into Pisces, which is the sign it rules, back in 2011. Will be in this sign until about 2026. So we still have several years to go with Neptune in its own sign. Does Neptune get a bad rap from astrologers? Yes and no. I read mostly negative things about Neptune because Neptune is a ruler of Pisces, and it is said to create a lot of confusion, maybe aimlessness in a sense, not feeling like you're sure of your direction, so confusion and deception, and maybe over-idealization, over-idealizing a certain thing in life. And the sixth house is a very practical house. So when you have Neptune here, I have this in my natal chart, so this is a never-ending challenge, let me tell you. When Neptune is transiting your sixth house, you can feel like there's something that is very confusing about your work. It can feel like you don't know what your purpose is anymore. And I would say, especially if you are middle-aged, you might say, well, it must be my midlife crisis. But actually, anybody who has this, even if you're fresh out of college, it could be one of those deals where you have majored in something and you feel disillusioned, especially during the Neptune retrograde, because that can actually give you a reality check in this area. For some people, it can be strange symptoms, health symptoms that you can't pinpoint. You go to a doctor and you can't pinpoint. They say that Neptune, if you have Neptune in the sixth house, and I'm assuming this would be true for the transit because it's true for the natal placement, that you have to be careful about drugs because you're very sensitive to them. Neptune is drugs, and it gives like an enhanced effect, in other words. And Neptune in the sixth house can indicate deception with coworkers. So you may find yourself, even if you quit a job like that you get another one. You know what I mean? So it's like that there's some kind of a trend of people that maybe they're two-faced, maybe they don't like, they lie about you. Something isn't quite right and you can't put your finger on it. And during the Neptune retrograde, it may come out what that thing is. But Neptune goes direct on the 28th, and it makes it so that you can focus on the positive aspect of this. And not to say that when it's retrograde, it's negative, because if you're finding out something about somebody, that could be a very good thing. I mean, you don't want to have these secret enemies. That's not really a good thing either, so it's all good, let's face it. Also, one of the things when Neptune is transiting this house, I would think that for some Libra individuals, this may give a desire for a more spiritual type of work or creative type of work. And you do have Uranus transiting your 8th house, Libra, which Uranus can be astrology and intuitive things. The 8th house is connected to the occult. So some Libra people may already be getting involved in more of these things. Now, Uranus is very what we call erratic or sudden, or kind of like unpredictable. So this may come on very suddenly. You may have a psychic experience, that like a paranormal experience that sets you on a course of looking at life in a more spiritual way, something like that. So on the 30th, there is a lunar eclipse at 8 degrees of Gemini. So Gemini is a fellow air sign. So this is where the action is for the next year, Gemini and Sag eclipses. So they're affecting the 3rd and 9th houses. And these mental houses are really compatible with you, Libra, not only because of the angles that are formed, but because of what they represent. Libra, being an air sign, is intellectual And these areas support that. And this is the house of the higher mind. And a lunar eclipse here can bring like a spiritual download that can affect your course of life itself. I mean, it could be that I never know if it's momentous, something like that, notable in your life. And, this is also a house of, this is the God house. So any kind of time when you have a lunar eclipse, it's like letting go of that resistance, maybe through the intellect, to allow messages to flood in that have a message of guidance of your philosophical direction in life. This is the house of philosophy. It's also a house of long distance travel, so that might be featured for you, and this is the time when that all becomes able to, to manifest, where perhaps before you were preparing and it was put on hold because it was shut down, and now you're able to do this. And perhaps it has obviously you can always be traveling for pleasure, but for Libra, I could see a working holiday if you are even associated with academia, a traveling professor, a person who is a student, foreign, like what do they call that, studying abroad? But it's almost like, full moons can bring things to completion. So perhaps this is the person who's retiring from academia. And maybe it's not so much you initiating it. Sometimes lunar eclipses, they're going to happen regardless. You're not really in the driver's seat necessarily. However, it might be something that you had thought about. Especially if Neptune is in that sixth house, you may have liked what you do, but you don't like the environment. And so there is the ability for you to let go more readily because the universe is providing an out for you. And that's actually a good thing. Some people would characterize it, let's say you're over 65 and you still love what you do, and you get forced out, in air quotes, of a university position. And it feels like you've been hijacked by them, and it feels disrespectful. And yet after it's all over, you realize it was the best thing that ever happened because you needed that time off to just savor life. And maybe you were full of stress, and you would have never done it on your own. So we can always choose to view things in a more supportive way that really adds to our sense of self and feeling more in control of what happens to us. So anyway, Libra, I hope that this resonated with you. And I offer personal readings, natal chart interpretations that can look at some of your hidden talents. And this can be especially helpful if you're going through, kind of a transition in your life to a different type of work, or just wondering what you want to do next. I have life path readings, natal chart interpretations, a look at the transits, important transits ahead in the coming year, and other types of readings. The link is below to learn more about those. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.